First of all, thank you everyone for being here. With great enthusiasm, we would like to extend a warm welcome to the 36th edition of the University Book Fair, organized by Universidad Autónoma del Estado de Hidalgo. This is a universitary space in which we converge knowledge, culture, and community. It is a great pleasure for us to introduce one of our main speakers of this Universitary Book Fair edition. I would like to introduce to Dr. Bruce Schneier. Did I pronounce it correctly?
It's pretty good, Schneier.
Schneier, okay.
That's perfect.
Dr. Bruce Schneier is an international renowned security technologist called as a security guru by the economists. He is the author of over 1,000 books, including his latest, A Hacker's Mind, as well as hundreds of articles, essays, and academic papers. His influential newsletter, Cryptogram, and his blog, Schneier on Security, are read by over 250,000 people. He has testified before Congress. He's a frequent guest on television and radio, has served on several government committees, and is regularly quoted in the press. Schneier is a fellow at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University, a lecturer in public policy at Harvard Kennedy School, a board member of the Electronic Frontier Foundation and Access Now, and an advisory board member of the Electronic Privacy Information Center and verifiedvoting.org. He is the chief of security architecture at ingroup.inc. Without further ado, I would like to pass the mic to Dr. Schneier so he can start his conference, Securing a World of Physically Capable Computers. Thank you so much.
Hey, good morning. I hope you could all hear me. I hope to have come down in person, but this is the first week of classes here at Harvard where I'm teaching, and I was unable to get away. So you are stuck with me remotely from Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm going to talk about a book I wrote a few years ago. This is with the awesome title of Click Here to Kill Everybody, where I'm going to talk about what the title said, Securing a World of Physically Capable Computers. This is not my latest book. My latest book is called A Hacker's Mind, where I talk about how to think about hacking social and political systems. But I decided to talk about the older book because I think it's really relevant in a world where we're seeing more and more capabilities from artificial intelligence. When I wrote that book, I didn't write about AI at all. That was 2018, which seems like a world ago today. But in this year, 2023, we've seen so much happening with artificial intelligence that it's worth really revisiting the things I talked about in that book about what happens when computers become capable. And what I started by saying is that we're creating a world where everything is a computer. And so this is not a phone. This is a small portable computer that happens to make phone calls. And similarly, your refrigerator is a computer that keeps things cold. And your microwave oven is a computer that makes things hot. And an ATM machine is a computer with money inside. Now, I just bought a new car, and it is very much a computer with 4 wheels and an engine. And actually, if you pay attention more, it really is a 100+ computer distributed system with 4 wheels and an engine. And now this is more than the internet. Right? This is more than the Internet of Things. It's an immersive computational world that we're living in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that means several things. It means internet security, which is the field I study, becomes everything security. And all the lessons from my world of internet security become applicable to everything everywhere. So I want to start by giving 6 lessons of why computers are still hard to secure, which is a kind of an important question. Here we are, 2023. We started doing this in the 1970s, 1960s, certainly 1980s. Like, why are we still having trouble securing computers? So I have 6 lessons to explain that. The first one is that most software is poorly written and insecure. And the basic reason is economics. We don't want to pay for quality software. There's a joke in the United States about restaurants: good, fast, cheap, pick any two. It's also kind of true for software. And the market tends to pick fast and cheap over good. Right? We want our software fast, we want it cheap, we want it to have a lot of features, and we don't pay a lot of attention to security. Some, but not much. And this results in poor software that's full of bugs. Some of those bugs are security vulnerabilities. Some of those are exploitable, and some of those are exploited. And this is why, all the time there are new exploits being discovered. If you have Microsoft Windows, you know that second Tuesday of every month, you're downloading about 100 patches in your security update. Those are all patching vulnerabilities. If you're a Microsoft user, that happens more ad hoc, but it's the same basic problem. Google is no different. That all the software we have has many, many security vulnerabilities, most of them undiscovered. The second lesson is that the internet was never designed with security in mind. Now, this is kind of crazy when I say it today. When you think back to the early days of the internet, late 1970s, early 1980s, there were 2 things that were true. One, the internet wasn't being used for anything important ever. And 2, you had to be a member of a research organization to get access to it in the first place. Right? Access was limited. So because of those things, there was a conscious decision to ignore security in the internet and leave it to the endpoints. Now, the endpoints were mainframes, they had security. And then 1980s rolls around and we start connecting computers to the internet that were never designed to be connected to a network. Right? We connected PCs. Right? And the network was never designed to have those single-use computers connected to it. And we're still living with the effects of those decisions. The domain name system, internet routing, packet security, email addresses, these are all insecure protocols that we're trying to retrofit security on and having a kind of a not a great time about it. The third lesson is that the extensibility of computerized systems means everything can be used against us. Now, extensibility is an important property of computers that doesn't really exist with anything else. It basically means that you can't constrain the functionality of a computer because it runs software. So when I was a kid, I had an old telephone, big black thing attached to the wall with a cord. Maybe your parents had one. Maybe you've seen one on television. It was a great device, but it couldn't do anything other than being a telephone. It was a single-use device. It was not a computer. Right? This, right, again, is a computer that makes phone calls. It can do whatever you want. In the United States, when the iPhone was released, their first advertising slogan was, "There's an app for that." Right? Making the point that whatever you want this to do, you can always download new software. That makes them fundamentally different from that old telephone because it's extensible. It can always do new things. And that makes it a very hard system to secure because you can't know what it's going to be doing tomorrow. Right? Every computer can get upgraded with additional features and capabilities. And these can accidentally add insecurities. Right? That's how botnets work. Right? That's how all of these malware systems work. They're new functionality on your computer and phone that you don't want. But because it's extensible, you can't block them. The fourth lesson is that the complexity of computerized systems means attack is easier than defense. And this has always been true in computers. Complexity is the worst enemy of security. Some of this is sort of the way attack and defense works. The defender has to defend the entire attack surface, but the attacker just has to find one unsecured avenue of attack. Right? So the more complex system it is, the bigger attack surface it has. It's harder for you to secure, a college building than your home. Right? More doors, more windows, more people, more things going on. Right? And computers are the same way. And that means attack is easier than defense, also means that testing is hard. Fifth lesson is that there are new vulnerabilities in the interconnections. The more we connect things to each other, the more vulnerabilities in one thing affect other things. And there are lots of examples of this. 2016, there were vulnerabilities in digital video recorders and webcams that allowed hackers to create a botnet that were used to attack a domain name service in the Netherlands, and then that dropped, and about 25 popular websites fell off the internet. Right? It was a cascade of vulnerabilities. And that's very, very common. Now, you think each thing is contained, but they're actually connected, and the connections yield to new insecurities. And we find examples of two individually secure systems. When you put them together, the result is insecurity. It's a very hard thing to notice and to fix because there are so many pieces to complex systems. And my sixth lesson is that attacks always get better, easier, and faster. And some of this is Moore's law. Computer gets to get faster. A password that was good 10 years ago might not be good today. Not because we're smarter, just we can guess passwords faster now than we could 10 years ago. But we do get smarter. Attackers get smarter, and they adapt. They're always coming up with new attacks and new ways to subvert systems. And expertise flows downhill. What today is a top secret NSA program, tomorrow is someone's PhD thesis, and the next day it's a criminal hacking tool. And we see that again and again and again. Okay? And it seems like these insecurities happen faster than we are able to come up with new ways to secure systems. All right, so none of this is new. A lot of the lessons I've told you are years old, decades old. But up to now, it's been a manageable problem. We've kind of gotten by with the security we have. But I think for a confluence of reasons, we're reaching a crisis. And it's automation, autonomy, and physical agency that bring new dangers. Right? Automation, it can be as simple as a thermostat and complex as a robot. Autonomy can be as simple as a thermostat and as complex as an AI. And the difference is the physical agency, that the computers affect the world in a direct physical manner. And so traditionally, we have been concerned with something called confidentiality, right? Privacy, data theft, data misuse. Most of the time, when there's a computer security story in the news, it is a confidentiality story. How did they get that data? What are they doing with that data? But the threats really come in many forms, right? Availability threats. You can't get to the thing. So that's ransomware. That's a denial of service attack. Integrity threats. The data is wrong. And if I hack into a bank and manipulate the bank balances, I'm not stealing any data, but because I'm affecting the integrity of the database, I'm stealing money. And my point is that today, the integrity and availability threats are much worse than the confidentiality threats. Right? The effects are much greater. They are real risks to life and property. So yes, I'm concerned, right? If someone hacks a hospital and steals my private patient medical records. But I'm much more concerned if they change my blood type. Right? That is a data integrity attack that could kill me. And yes, I don't want someone to hack into my car and turn on the Bluetooth microphone and eavesdrop on my conversations, but I really don't want them to disable the brakes. right? That is a data availability attack that can kill me. So when you think about cars, medical devices, drones, weapon systems, thermostats, power plants, smart city systems, these are computers connected to the world that affect the world and have real risk to life and property. But there's a fundamental difference between uh, your computer crashes and you lose your spreadsheet data, and your pacemaker crashes and you lose your life. But it could be the exact same CPU, an operating system, an application, and vulnerability, an attack tool, and attack. The difference is what the computer is attached to and what it can do. Right? And these trends become even more dangerous as our systems become more critical. So I have a seventh lesson that computers fail differently. They all work perfectly until one day when none of them do. Right? So if you think about cars, right? For cars, they fail like old things, right? They break once in a while, and there are repair shops in our community that handle the once in a while cars that break. They don't break in the way that they're all failing at the same time. But computers have that failure mode. There's a new vulnerability, a new attack, and suddenly nothing works. And we're not ready for that with many of these systems. So at the same time of these three trends, some of our long-standing security systems are failing. I want to talk about three of them. The first one is patching. So our computers and phones are as secure as they are for two reasons. First is the engineers at Microsoft and Apple and Google that do their best to design them securely in the first place. And two, those same engineers are quickly and effectively able to deliver security patches when someone discovers a new vulnerability. Right? This solves the problem that we don't know how to secure systems. We can't make them secure out of the box, so we are agile in patching them so they regain security quickly. And that works pretty well. The problem is that's not true for low-cost embedded systems like digital video recorders and webcams and home routers and toys and drones and all those Internet of Things things. They're designed at a much lower profit margin. They're often built offshore by third parties. They don't have security teams associated with the devices. Right? There's nobody to write those patches for your internet connected toys. Even worse, many of them have no way to patch. You can't patch the software, you can't patch the firmware. Right now, the way you update your home router is you throw it away and buy a new one. That's the patch mechanism. And, to be fair, the replacement devices is another way we get security. We get a new phone, we get a new computer every few years. And that's not true for embedded system. You have a DVR, it's going to work for the next 10 years. Your refrigerator, 25 years. Your thermostat, really for your lifetime. Right? So we're going to have to deal with decades old IoT systems and how to secure them. We don't know how to do that. Right? Microsoft and Apple both depreciate their operating systems after a decade because it's really hard to maintain the old stuff. And there isn't a market in the cheap old stuff. The second thing is authentication. Now, this has really only just barely worked, but we have problems. Human memorizable passwords no longer work in a lot of situations. Two-factor authentication isn't suitable for a lot of situations. Backup authentication is terrible. A lot of us use our email addresses as authentication, or we get an email, we click on a link and get authenticated. Now suddenly our email authentication is the key to everything else. But the problem is the amount of authenticating we're going to do is going to explode exponentially. So normally authentication is one of two things. I'm going to demonstrate them both. Okay, so I authenticated to my phone. I used Face ID, and I got my email. I authenticated to remote service, right? And my phone had my password and did that automatically. And you saw that worked pretty well. As long as this device is secure, I'm good. The problem is IoT is all about things talking to other things behind our back. And that requires things authenticating to things, right? So your Fitbit is now to authenticate to your refrigerator or to your phone, or maybe your alarm clock authenticates to something else. And if you imagine you have 100 IoT devices sort of in your orbit, they all need to talk to each other. That's 10,000 authentications. Like, we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to authenticate things at scale or ad hoc. You can imagine some kind of driverless car will have to authenticate automatically in the moment to thousands of other cars and traffic signals and road signs and security alerts and I don't know, policeman alerts, all sorts of things, and maybe embedded sensors in the road. This all has to be authenticated. We don't know how to do that. Like, we can do it a little bit. I mean, right now, when I go into my car, this device automatically authenticates to the car and uses the microphone and speakers. Right? You know how that works. That's Bluetooth. This also authenticates to some pair of remote speakers I have in my backyard. Right? That works, but if you remember with Bluetooth, you have to set that up manually. You have to pair the devices. And that doesn't scale. I'll pair 3, 4, maybe 10. I'm not going to pair 10,000 devices. I won't be able to pair things as my car is driving on the road. We don't know how to do that. And the third thing that's failing is supply chain security, which is insurmountably hard. So in the United States, there's a lot of talk about Chinese networking equipment, and we're worried that the Chinese are going to use it to spy on us and take over systems. I'm sure in Mexico, there's their own national things we're worried about. A few years ago in the United States, we were about Kaspersky, right? Can you trust Russian antivirus equipment? This is not just the US, lots of examples in other places. And it's an important question, right? Can you trust a technology from a country whose government you don't trust? It's an important question. It's a hard one, but it's really just the beginning of a problem. This is a US device, but it's not made in the US. Its chips aren't made in the US. Its programmers carry 100 different passports. Right? So the vulnerabilities here are very complex. You have to trust the development process, the distribution mechanism, the update mechanism. That was SolarWinds. Right? We have fake apps in the Google Play Store. You have to trust the shipping mechanism. All sorts of things. Supply chains are really hard to secure, and we don't know how to do it. Right? You can't trust anyone, yet you have to trust everyone, and we have no better answer than this. And this is truly a hard problem. I mean, there are conferences in the United States about supply chain security, and the result is we don't know what to do. Right? U.S. military systems are vulnerable, and no one knows what to do to solve it. Right? I mean, you can imagine making a US-only iPhone. It would cost 10 times as much. No one would buy it. And only a few countries could do that. China can. India might be able to. The EU can't. The US can't. And nobody else can. Right? Nobody is big enough. We have a very international computer and electronics industry that you can't make domestic. So we have problems, right? In a lot of ways, this is a perfect storm. Security is failing just as everything has become connected. And we've been okay with an unregulated tech space because it didn't matter. And that's no longer sustainable. So I think primarily this is a policy problem, and getting the policy right is critical. And in fact, like a third of this book talks about security policy, what policies we need to do to secure things in this world of physically capable computers. A lot of different parts of this: standards, regulations, liabilities, international agreements. I want to talk about 3. There's a lot more here, but I just want to list 3 of them. First one is a policy principle that defense has to dominate. Right? Or say it: one world, one network, one answer. In the United States, we had the NSA that had two jobs: to defend US military systems and attack Soviet military systems. And they were able to do that because our stuff and their stuff were different. Today, everyone uses the same stuff, right? Everyone has iPhones. Everyone uses Microsoft Windows, PDF files, email, the internet. And either all those systems are secure or not. So either everyone gets security or no one gets security. Or to put it the other way, either everyone gets a spy or no one gets a spy. You can't build a system where the good guys get to spy and the bad guys don't, or where the good guys have security and the bad guys don't. And as we live in a world where security becomes so important, we need to design for security and not for surveillance. We need to adopt a defense dominant strategy. Second principle is technical. We need to build resilience into our systems, right? Assume insecurity and design systems that work anyway. Now, a lot of these principles we know: defense in depth, compartmentalization, avoiding single points of failure, ways to fail safe, ways to fail secure, removing functionality, deleting data, having systems monitor other systems, right? These are all pretty standard ideas we need to implement. And there's a research question here that rivals the internet itself. In the 1960s, the internet was created to answer this question: can we build a reliable network out of unreliable parts in an unreliable world? I have a similar question. Can we build a secure network out of insecure parts in an insecure world? I mean, the answer isn't obviously yes, but it's not obviously no either. And lastly, I have an economic principle. We need to build security incentives in properly. So right now, the incentives are all wrong. The incentives are for insecurity. So I'm going to tell the SolarWinds story. So SolarWinds was a network management package that was installed in tens of thousands of networks worldwide. And the Russians hacked the company, put a backdoor in an update. The update was pushed out to the customers who installed the update, and now all the networks were owned by the Russians. This is how it happened. So this is very much a supply chain vulnerability problem. The story behind it is that SolarWinds was owned by a company called Thoma Brava. Thoma Brava is a private equity firm run by a Brazilian billionaire. And the way private equity works is they buy companies like SolarWinds that are sticky, and they pull as much cash out of the company as possible. They reduce the quality of the product, the quality of the service. They make it as lousy as possible without losing customers too quickly. And eventually, they pull the cash out and leave the company to die. Right? So Thoma Brava skimped on security to save money for the private equity firm, which is why they had such bad security, which is why the Russians could hack them. Right? And this is not an anomaly. This kind of economic incentive happens all the time. It's why banking websites are insecure. It's why phones are vulnerable to SIM swapping. It's why Facebook does such a lousy job at removing in from misinformation. It's why IoT devices are so insecure. We need to raise the cost of insecurity and incent security. And that spurs innovation and security. The real question is how to get from here to there. I mean, I don't think markets solve this. Right? Markets are short term, markets are profit motivated, right, at the expense of security, and markets can't solve collective action problems. Governments are how we solve problems like this. Now, of course, a lot of problems here. It's hard for governments to be proactive. Regulatory capture. We're dealing with an adaptive, intelligent adversary. And there's a speed problem. Right? We have to regulate security in a fast-moving technological environment. I don't have the details, but I think the alternative is stopping to being viable because these computers now affect life and property. Governments around the world will get involved regardless because the risks are too great and the stakes are too high. So when I talk about this to regulators in the United States, I basically say our choice isn't between government involvement and no government involvement. Our choice is between smart government involvement and stupid government involvement. And that we need to start thinking about this, or like dumb things are going to happen. And good regulation incents private industry. Commonly heard in the United States that regulation stifles innovation. It's certainly not true, hasn't been true for anything else. Automobile safety, restaurant sanitation, there's no evidence. It's just something that people who dislike regulations say. But I think if you do this right, it leads to innovation because regulating outcomes spurs innovation in achieving those outcomes. So where this is happening mostly right now is Europe. The European Union is very much the regulatory superpower on the planet. In 2018, they passed something called GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations, and they have strong privacy requirements and even stronger penalties, and they've been enforcing it. The EU has an Internet of Things security law. It's not that great, but they're starting to enforce it. They're working right now on an AI security law, not yet passed, probably passed this year, early next year. In the United States, the individual states are leading the way. California, New York, Massachusetts, most of all. California has a privacy law modeled after the European law. They have an IoT security law. Right? New York is regulating cryptocurrencies. Massachusetts has a right to repair law. So we're seeing movement at the states. Well, in the United States, the federal government, there's some movement at the regulatory agencies. So the FAA that regulates aircraft, DOT that regulates cars, the FDA that regulates medical devices, the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, is looking at regulating IoT devices because they're all communicating over the radio, over Bluetooth. So that's where you're seeing some work. And the international considerations are interesting. So, right, GDPR is a European law, but it affects me in the United States because most software you write once and you sell everywhere. I mean, not like automobiles. I mean, right now, the car I buy in the United States is not the same car I buy in Mexico. Environmental laws are different, and the manufacturers tune their engines to the laws of the countries they sell the car in. But the Facebook I get in the United States is exactly the same Facebook I get in Mexico. I mean, the thermostat I buy is exactly the same. So you write the software once, you sell it everywhere. So if there is a privacy law in the European Union, if there is a security law in California, the companies fix their software to meet those requirements and sell them everywhere. So me living in Massachusetts, you living in Mexico, benefit from those laws, even though we are not in those jurisdictions. And that is really interesting to watch. I worked for IBM when GDPR came into force, and IBM said as a corporate policy, we are implementing GDPR everywhere because that is easier than figuring out who a European is. Right? So a good law in a large enough jurisdiction moves the planet. And that's very powerful. So whether it is Japan or Australia or the EU or the United States or Canada or India, right? They pass a good law, we all benefit. And I think this is the way we get security. This is the way we're going to secure these systems. So right now, what I want is for technologists and policymakers to talk to each other. Right? As internet security becomes everything security, security technology becomes more important to overall security policy. And we're never going to get the policy right if policymakers get the tech wrong. So we need this cross communication between technologists and policymakers. In a lot of ways, that's what I'm pushing. I want to see technologists get involved in the policy discussions. I want to see policymakers learn technology. I am teaching at the Harvard Kennedy School. I am teaching security technology to people getting masters in public policy because I want this gap to be bridged between technologists and policymakers because we're going to need that expertise as we start regulating these systems. Right, so that's my talk, and I'm happy to take questions. And I'm going to try to make your screen bigger so I can see you all. I don't know how we're going to ask questions. We have an interpreter here if that helps.
Can you hear me again, Professor?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for your presentation. It's really been a really interesting one. It's food for thought for us that there's some of us that are part of the field, some of those that are not related to cybersecurity. And we have here students from, can you guys tell me de qué carrera nos acompañan? They are all from computer science, so I think that they are more than interested than of asking questions. So
you're right. Yeah, you never know who you get. I'll get a mix of computer science and policy people.
Okay, so who wants to ask a question? It can be either in Spanish. We have the help of the interpreter, and she will be helping us.
But I'm going to answer in English because I'm sorry, that's what you get.
Okay, we will do a short test. Can you speak louder? Were you able to hear that?
Nope, I don't hear that. I hear you.
Yeah.
You might have to you might have to come up to the microphone or have someone relay the question. Yeah, I see you coming up. Good.
Can you hear me, doctor?
And now I hear you, yes.
Well, I have a question. Well, as Mexico is a country in development, what should be the next step that politicians should take to protect most of the information that they have in most of the access, not more private information that we have in the country? What should be the next step that Mexico should take to ensure that we as Mexicans are more secure from those types of attacks? We know that in the last few years, the amount of cyber attacks to government institutions have been increasing over and over. But what should be the next step?
Yeah, I actually don't have a good answer for you. So this is hard. And I had a bunch of students do a research project in this last year. We didn't have any good answers. The problem is that in our international world, most countries are what I call technology takers. Right? You are stuck taking whatever it is the United States and maybe the EU and maybe China give you. And that's not unique. Most countries are in this boat. Right? Whatever Facebook does, you have to accept. I mean, right now, Canada, like not a small country, passed a law that said that if Facebook links to Canadian news sites, they have to pay the Canadian news organizations. They're worried about the news companies losing all their money because it's all stuff's on Facebook. Facebook responded by shutting off the ability to link to Canadian news, which is crazy. But Facebook is that powerful, and Canada can't do anything about that. And that's the world we're in. So most of your data is in the cloud. It's not in Mexico. It's somewhere else. Where is it? We have no idea. Google won't even tell you. And if you don't like it, they just say don't use it. But what's the alternative? Your phones aren't made in Mexico. The data's not there. The equipment's not there. The services aren't there. And this is true for almost every country. In the United States, a lot of our stuff is in the United States. And so we don't have good national ways to deal with this. I want Mexico to pass good privacy laws. But if they do like Canada did, they'll be told, no by these companies. So, we have to band together. The EU is powerful enough because they're big. They're not just the European countries. The US is powerful enough because it's big. So's China. So's India. That's kind of it. So the more we band into large trade organizations and use our leverage there, the better we'll do. But this is really a hard problem. The companies are now more powerful than many of the countries on the planet. And that's not a good thing.
Thanks for the answer.
Another question?
Good morning.
Hey, good morning.
Quite large question. I'm going to read it. Knowing
Okay.
your thoughts on blockchain, have you changed lately your point of view in it? And what are your thoughts in the way it had changed the movement of money online and the way that people invest in the last decade?
Yeah, no, blockchain is still the stupidest thing ever. I have not changed my views on blockchain. It is idiotic. It is useful for nothing. If you're building anything with a blockchain, pull the blockchain out. It'll be better. It'll be more secure, more reliable, more everything. Blockchain does nothing. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? There's a whole lot of fraud out there. And yes, it has certainly changed how like the ransomware industry, it would not exist if it wasn't for blockchain. Quite a lot of so really exploitive porn would not exist if it wasn't for blockchain. So criminals use it, and we're stuck with that. But I would like to see it regulated out of existence. Don't know how likely that is. So yeah, that's kind of what I think. So no, nothing's changed.
Thank you.
Question?
All right, I see people come up, so this is nice.
Hello, Professor Bruce. I got a question. It's mostly about the exponential advances on AI. I was wondering if there's is it possible or is there a certain way to use it to vulner AI, IoT devices, security?
I mean, the answer is certainly yes. I don't think, a lot of it we don't know yet. The advances are happening, as you said, exponentially. They're happening so fast. There's so many like new ideas and new things, new capabilities. I mean, stuff that wasn't true in May is true now. And if I tell you something now, in December, it won't be true. So yes, I think there's going to be a lot of applications for AI in cybersecurity, both on the attack and on the defense. What they are, I don't think we know yet. Who has the upper hand, I don't think we know yet. But they are certainly going to be interesting. And sort of wait and see is the only thing I can tell you. But yes, I know there are like dozens of startups trying to use AI for cybersecurity. I was at the RSA conference in June, maybe that was in May, I forget when it was. And there was lots of companies that are promising this and that. Is any of it real? Who knows? Does any of it work? Who knows? But yes, it's going to be a huge area of development. And going to be interesting, right?
That's kind of a bummer, but thanks, we appreciate it.
Right? We don't know what's going to happen. I couldn't even tell you how it's going to affect the restaurant industry in a year, or the election. Wait, your election's not coming up for a while. Ours is going to happen sooner. It's going to be bad.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Another question?
Any other questions?
Yes, here. Is there anything scary or very dangerous about the legacy coding devices that aren't able to be patched that you mentioned before?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about that a bit. I mean, I think legacy code is going to be a huge problem, and it's going to be different, right? It's legacy originally, like legacy code right now tends to be like mainframes, old computers. Legacy in the future is going to be like an IoT toy that a company went out of business, or a drone, or some kind of small appliance in your kitchen. And it's going to have vulnerabilities. It won't be patchable. It'll be on the internet because it just is on the internet. And we're going to have to worry about its security. And its security will affect the security of your entire home network. So I think legacy code becomes really important. And we need new ways to think about legacy code and secure it. I mean, there are people working on the notion of systems that monitor other systems on the network. Right? So you might have a device on your home network whose job it is to pay attention to everything else. So if some legacy device starts acting weird, it can shut it down. We'll see how that works, right? But these are the kind of ideas people are thinking about. But yes, legacy is a huge problem, and it's going to get much worse. It's going to be small companies going out of business.
Thank you.
Hi. Well, I want to ask you, what can politics can do to make an alliance or work together at a time with that privacy industry that control us? But what can, in that power war, can do the government and the private industries to take care of about our integrity, or how can we be a little bit protected with
Yeah,
just politics?
I'm not a fan of the two working together. I think the government has to take action and pass regulations that the companies don't like. Otherwise, they're not going to be effective. I mean, basically. So I'm not a fan of working together. I think you get a lot of lousy security because working together means preserve company profits. And a lot of the things I want are going to make companies less profitable because I want real privacy and real security, which means Facebook spies on you less. So I'm more adversarial than that in my thinking.
So you think that the government should be more powerful or intelligent
Yes.
than
Yes.
industry?
Yes, I want more powerful government. And that
Thank you.
means bigger government, right? That means it's not going to be, it's why I said you really got to think about, larger trade organizations that where different governments band together and do things as one. Because there you're going to get more leverage than you can as a single country.
Thank you.
Hi. This is not a question per se. Could you share your thoughts about how quantum computer will change the game, so to speak?
I can. So I would urge you to actually go to the internet and get an essay I wrote. The title is Cryptography After the Aliens Land. And I write in detail the answer to that question. The short answer is we're going to be okay. Right? It doesn't really affect symmetric cryptography. Public key cryptography, cryptographers are working on post-quantum standards. Right? NIST just announced 4 algorithms that are going to be a post-quantum standard today. And so the math is ahead of the physics. So primarily, I think we'll be okay. I mean, there's a lot of detail in that. I want you to go to the essay, but basically, I think we'll be okay.
I read a long time ago that the governments are taking some policy about this quantum computer, something like that.
I mean, there is certainly U.S. policy. Like we are, the U.S. government is leading an effort on post-quantum cryptography standards. Now, that's a public effort. You go on the NIST website, you can read all about it and see the different algorithms and the papers and the work that's been done over the past like 4 or 5 years. So yes. I mean, the real worry right now is things encrypted under the old systems that can become vulnerable if they're saved. Like we know the NSA is like saving everything, probably for a day when their quantum computer can break it. And that's going to be the worry. But, really what we need is crypto agility, the ability to update our algorithms quickly, because that'll work no matter what the problem is.
Right. Thanks.
Questions?
All right, I think it's going to be my last question. I have to hang up after this.
Hello, Dr. Bruce. First of all, I want to say thank you for giving us some of your time to.
Oh, thanks for listening. I I like speaking to students, and doing it on Zoom is pretty easy, right? It takes me an hour. So thank you.
And I want to ask a question about your books. I know all of your books are about different subjects, but I want to ask for you, what's the most predominant subject you have in all your books? Like, which one? Yeah.
They're all about security, right? But the different aspects of it. In a sense, my career's been a series of generalizations. I'm going to look at my bookshelf on the wall. My first book is about cryptography, mathematical security. Then I write about computer security and network security, and then general security technology. Then I start writing about the economics of security, the psychology of security. I wrote a book about the sociology of security. Then I'm really writing about security policy. Right, so Dating Goliath is about privacy. Right, this book is about security and safety. And here I'm writing about even really non-computer security, right? Security of systems that are still systems, but not technological systems. So, I don't really have a most common because each book is another exploration of an idea. If there's a common thread, it's security and how it works in the world. And it's always getting bigger and bigger.
Thank you so much.
All right, so with that, I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you all for inviting me. Enjoy the rest of your book fair. And if you have this on not the first week of classes, again, I'll come down and visit.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Professor.
Bye all.
Muchas gracias a todos por estar presentes en esta plática. El profesor estaba invitado para venir presencialmente, pero por cuestiones de agenda lo organizamos de manera virtual. Esperamos que lo hayan disfrutado, que sea beneficioso para ustedes y bueno, agradecerles nuevamente y que continúen en las actividades de la feria. Muchísimas gracias.